Hello and welcome to Press Corner, our regular Sunday morning review of key events with our colleagues in the media and other experts here in the heart of Europe. On Press Corner, we celebrate the privilege of a free press by listening to diverse opinions and letting our audience reach their own conclusions. Today, along with our guests, we have Aleksandra Krasińska. She's a journalist with Forbes Women. We have Bogusław Chrabota, right? Editor-in-chief of, and this is even more difficult for me, Rzeczpospolita.
Rzeczpospolita.
Okay, I'm doing it.
Simply Republic, you can say.
Republic,
yeah.
Excellent. Let's stay with Republic. Adam Borowski, journalist and international relations analyst, and David McQuaid is a journalist. So welcome to all of you and looking forward to what you have to say. We're going to kick off talking about the prisoner exchange between Russia and the West. And before we start the conversation, there's a short video I'd like to share with you.
US journalist Evan Gershkovich hugs his mother after touching down in Maryland. He and former Marine Paul Whelen were back in the US hours after being freed from Russian detention in the biggest prisoner exchange between the two countries since the Cold War. Also released was Alsu Kumasheva, a Russian-American journalist sentenced last month to 6.5 years in prison. The deal took more than a year of secret negotiations and involved 24 prisoners, 16 moving from Russia to the West and 8 sent the other way. The White House said it negotiated the trade with Russia, Belarus, Germany, Norway, Poland and Slovenia. Turkey coordinated the exchange. Gershkovich's colleagues at the Wall Street Journal greeted the prisoner swap with cheers. He and Whelen were separately convicted in Russia on spying charges they denied. Rico Krieger, a German, had been sentenced to death in Belarus on terrorism charges. Vladimir Kara-Murza had been serving 25 years for treason after saying Putin was bombing Ukrainian homes, hospitals and schools. Released with them were human rights activist Oleg Orlov and Russian opposition politician Ilya Yashin. Many of those freed had worked with Alexei Navalny, Russia's leading opposition figure, who died in unclear circumstances in an Arctic penal colony in February. President Vladimir Putin, meanwhile, met Russian prisoners who returned home. They included a Secret Service's hitman, David McQuaid, who was convicted of the 2019 murder of a former Chechen militant in Berlin. He was accompanied by people who've been described as deep-cover Russian sleeper agents.
So there's a bit of background. Bogusław, as it's the first time you've been on Press Corner, I'd like to start with you.
Nice to be here.
Nice to have you. So tell me, what do you make of this exchange? There were fewer in number Russian prisoners released, but they were different, weren't they?
Yeah, of course, yeah. It's a great day for, the word opinion, and it's a great day for these poor people who were prisoners in Russia. Not for us, not for us. Why? Because we expected Andrew Poczobut to be among them. And as you know, Andrew Poczobut is a journalist of Gazeta Wyborcza from Warsaw. He is Belarusian. He's one of the leaders of Polish minority in Belarus,
yeah.
And he's kept in a camp somewhere. We even don't know where and what is his condition now. So we expected him to be in the group of these people who were exchanged, and I believe that it's not a proof that a word opinion forgotten about him, but it's the beginning of a next attempt to let him come back home, to Poland. And one thing, I've experienced, I remember such situations from the previous system, from 80s and 70s.
Right.
That's major difference, because that time in the past, this was an exchange of spies from both sides. And
yes.
Today, we have spies and criminals from one side, and we have people who were fighting freedom fighters from the other.
Absolutely. Journalists, freedom fighters.
Yes. And journalists like Gershkovich, who was...
Yeah.
Who still is the member of Wall Street Journal. So it's not parallel, but it gives a good view for the future. Means channels are still active. It's possible
Well,
to
channels are
exchange.
still active, but I mean, you know, it's taken, I mean, people saying it took 2 years to set this thing up.
Better 2 years than never.
Right.
Well, okay, but I'd say something.
I agree with what Bogusław said, but also you mentioned that this is a similar situation that we remember from the Cold War times. And this is something I would really like to point, that we are again in a situation that the government's international community has to do a prisoner swap, a prisoners exchange. And in a way, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we are in the Cold War again, the same as we used to have. But this is different situation, but similar. We are still in a new kind of Cold War. There is a hybrid warfare against Europe, against...
Is prisoner exchange part of that hybrid warfare?
I think so. I think so. This is a sign that we are in the middle of it. And also another point I would like to make, that we are cheering today. We are happy that these people, that I think 23 persons were exchanged, and many of them prisoners of conscience, as you mentioned, freedom fighters, but journalists, and actually innocent people. But there are still hundreds of people back then in Russia and in Belarus.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you touched on that point, Aleksandra. I mean, David, Adam, I want to come to you. Evan Gershkovich said that there were hundreds of people, you know, whom no one's ever heard of, but they're all political prisoners.
Yes, and you need to remember about Ukrainians at the same time that there seems to be this gradation of value of life, right? Because you have Ukrainian children who are in Russia and in Belarus, and nobody really talks about them. Not that, you know, when you compare what's happening with the prisoner swap, right? So, of course, I understand that it's a highly complex situation and you can't just, you know, help Ukrainians that way. But there seems to be this implicit gradation of life, you know, and, of course, another point you can make is...
How do you mean implicit gradation of life?
Well, you know, maybe something could have been done to maybe help Ukrainians more, you know, someone, not just Westerners and, you know, and the high profile, let's say, right? Maybe there would have been a nice gesture, but I don't know how it works exactly, right? We don't know how it works, you know, between them, right? When the swap happened, we don't know how it works exactly. We can guess that there is some intelligence, you know, work involved and so on. But it's definitely, it's a great sign that they were freed. They have been freed, but at the same time, there is this aftertaste, unfortunately, this sour aftertaste that, you know, there are so many people, so many children still held captive. Of course, I'm not saying that we can, you know, help everyone.
Yeah.
But there has to be this, you know...
Well, it's quite interesting. I mean, how do they decide, David? You know, how do they decide who they're going to...
I'd like to highlight two things. First of all, this was a spy or hitman for hostage swap.
Right.
Particularly, it's worth paying attention to the Germans who were seized. I mean, you basically have a Red Cross worker who was snapped up off the street and then accused of plotting a terrorist attack. Completely implausible. You have people who were, let's say, visiting sick mothers, you know, had dual citizenship and then were picked up. And so, essentially, one of the things that Western countries are going to have to press very hard on is for their citizens not to go to Russia, that Russia essentially put itself in the same class as North Korea in terms of the possibility of being kidnapped or imprisoned. That's number one. Number two, the spy swap may have very, very important political implications. I'll mention two right now. One is in Ukraine, and I think this was something that is mentioned in Rzeczpospolita, for example, was the possibility that this was a signal. These were, most of all, these were U.S.-Russia negotiations, and this was a signal sent from Moscow to Washington that maybe we're ready to talk about Ukraine, and this is the first sign that we can do a deal. And then the second thing, tied with that, was that you had Donald Trump in the U.S. presidential campaign saying, I am the only one who can really negotiate the release of the hostages. Well, gosh darn it, Biden was able to do it, and Biden was able to take the credit. This may have been a little gesture of Putin towards Biden saying, maybe it's time we can do another deal.
Yeah. I mean, please go on.
If I can add three points. First, this was not an exchange between Moscow and Kiev. So don't mix it. Okay? These were long negotiations between Washington and Moscow.
And other countries.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about the number of cases of exchange between Ukraine and Russia? It was a number of them. Yeah, hostages were just exchanged. So that's first, and that's a good sign for the future, I think. Yeah. All about possibility. Point two. Navalny was not a part of exchange.
Right. I want to come to that.
And that's not a success for us, because he should be there. He died before. He was killed before. And the third comment is that the same day that we had exchange, it was the bomb attack on the house of Ilya Ponomaryov in Kiev, the leader of Russian opposition, one of three, most important guys who are against Putin, operating from the West. It was probably a drone attack on his house. Thank God he survived. I know him and his family very well, and I know under which kind of pressure he is in Kiev. He has 8 people of the guards surrounding him every step, every place he walks, he travels, etc. So from the one side, you have a gesture from Putin that he's able to exchange hostages and spies, etc. From the other, Russian military or intelligence activity,
we can still be effective.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you, Aleksandra, Navalny.
Unfortunately, he didn't survive. There were talks unofficially that he was supposed to be a part of this deal.
Right.
But what I want to add to your point is that from why Russia agreed to this whole situation, because we have to understand this is a signal from the government, from the Putin, that his people, KGB people, agent operating in Europe, around the globe, will be protected. He will do everything to free them, to save them, and they will be loyal to him. Remember, he is a KGB agent himself. He used to be. So he treated this complex, this military security complex, as his background, as his family almost, I would say.
Right.
So I think that there is this darker side to this whole positive outcome. We first of all should really be appreciative to a government, also an American government, to conduct this operation. But we have to remember what is the goal behind the Russia, and it is to show the solidarity that you can do whatever I tell you, kill people on the street,
you'll be protected.
Opposition leaders, send drone attacks, etc. But you will be protected.
So it's a gesture for local, Russian public opinion, not for the world, I think. From this
It's actually very important at a moment when Russia, by all evidence, indicates that they're about to ramp up their sabotage and diversion operations in the West, so that more of their personnel are going to be exposed. So this is saying, don't worry, we'll get you out.
Yeah, we will. And it is somewhat disappointing, isn't it, Adam, that the ones that the West agreed to release were people of this caliber, including assassins and fraudsters and so on. But there is criticism that Poland shouldn't have released the spy that they caught here. What do you say?
Well, this was a superpower game, and let's be honest, Poland is not a superpower, so it might be brutal, but we are just pawns, essentially. So I don't think that would be realistic to expect that Poland could actually voice any opposition that would be really, taken into account. I doubt that, right? Besides, realpolitik, right? The politics, of course, the pragmatic side dictates that sometimes you need to be, do things that are unsavory. That's just how it is, right? So, of course, we need to remember that there are people still imprisoned, but at the same time, if you can save someone, then you need to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, of course, there'll always be some bleeding
within
hearts.
The context of...
Yeah, there'll always be some bleeding hearts that will never like this, but that's just how it is. That's reality. And reality is harsh at times cynical, and we need to accept it and we need to deal with it.
We need to deal with it, and as we need to deal with our next topic, Hungary has said that it is going to allow easier access to Hungarian visas for Russians and Belarusians. The concern, of course, is that these people will be able to travel visa-free throughout the Schengen region. We've got a short video, and I'd like to take your view.
Hungary relaxed visa rules that grant citizens of 8 countries, including Russia and Belarus, permission to enter its territory without security checks. Lithuania accused Budapest of trying to destabilise the European Union.
Recent events may suggest a Hungary seeking to become a member of a different alliance. There are other alliances to the east of us that it may consider joining. De facto, by the content of its actions, Hungary is doing everything that benefits Russia, trying to destabilize the situation in the EU.
The EU's internal affairs chief warned Hungary that its decision posed a potential security threat and has written to Budapest demanding answers. Soon after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, European capitals expelled some 500 spies. It's thought Hungary's visa relaxation could allow Russian agents a back door into the bloc. Hungary's relationship with Europe has soured since Budapest assumed the rotating presidency of the EU Council on July the 1st. Soon after, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban embarked on a series of self-proclaimed peace missions that included visits to Moscow and Beijing. The European Parliament criticised Orban's meeting with Putin. If the European Commission finds EU law has been broken over the visa scheme, it can take legal action against the offending member country.
Bogusław, can you make any sense of Viktor Orban's behaviour over the last few weeks?
I think that he plays his own game.
What is that game?
The game is about also for the domestic market, I think, for domestic public opinion. He presents himself as a savior of Hungary, of tradition, of religion, of the values he protects. In fact, he had no allies in European Union after the fall of Kaczynski in Warsaw and before Fico came to power and his government in Slovakia. So today, I think, you must remember about the ideology he offers to his followers in Hungary. That's a kind of resentment of the Trianon Treaty of 1918 that he promises, to rebuild the power of Hungary. Hungary before, a century ago, was really a power. It was much bigger, twice bigger. And that's why he generalizes people from Slovakia, even Austria, where there is a number of Hungarians living in eastern Austria. So he provokes, the kind of idea that he is the only one in Europe today who is able to, first of all, to keep values, second, to keep the tradition of big Hungary, and that, at the other hand, he has no choices. For example, about his nuclear system that he has.
Yeah.
PAX. It's the only one and controlled by Russian technology. Nuclear plant.
Right. So
And it's not easy just to change technology from in the moment from former Soviet.
Yeah, but
now
this
Russian.
but this is different. These are giving them visas without checks.
Politics is a combination of different factors.
Well, it certainly is, but without security checks, this is what's surprising a lot of people.
It is in Europe today. Even today, I just came back from Bulgaria a couple of days ago, and I was for my vacations. It's a regular transfer from Istanbul to Europe by taxi drivers. So it's a kind of a myth that European Union is secure because of procedures on the borders.
Yeah, okay.
I would give another answer, because what you presented is a narration, historical narration, political narration that Orban is playing out inside the country and outside. But from my perspective, Orban is, I would say, Trojan horse in European Union. And he's an ally of China and Russia. And his politics domestically, in the way he invests in his economy. In example, building huge factories of electric cars, electric vehicles from China. This is China technology, China investment, very close ties. Same with Russia. His dependence on oil, on gas from Russia is unchangeable during the last 2 years of the full-scale invasion in Ukraine. So I would say he actually claims it openly that he wants to stay in European Union, but he wants to change it
From inside.
From inside.
Yeah.
And he is an authoritarian style politician. And I think this is something that is really we really have a problem with.
Yeah. We have a problem with that. Would you agree, Adam?
Yes, I think he.
What do we do about it?
He is trying to be this, he kind of jumps around and tries to keep his one foot, in the EU and another in Russia and China and so on. He wants to balance as much as he can. Well, what can you do, right? You can't really influence him. I don't think that he can be influenced that much. I think he's made up his mind. And we don't really know what kind of arrangements he has, if any, right, with external forces in Russia or in China, for example.
But we can tell quite a lot by his behavior, can't we? I mean,
Yeah, he's trying to balance. He's trying to portray himself as this man of reason, essentially, right? That's what he wants to be. That he's he's trying to keep it all together. But of course, we can do something, but I don't think that he's going to be influenced by it straight away.
Right.
It's going to take some time and.
I disagree completely.
I'll come back to you in just a second. David, balanced man of reason. Would you characterize Orban that way?
No, I think Viktor
That's how
Orban...
he wants to be seen.
Understood.
Yeah.
But he is not actually that.
Of course not. Okay. But that's how he wants to be seen.
Understood.
Let's be clear.
Mm-hmm.
I think Viktor Orban is one of our age's most important political innovators. And I think what he's doing right now, what he is, in fact, is the European Union's only dictator. He intends to be president for life. And that is exactly why he's doing the things he's doing right now. His technique is brinksmanship, creating a conflict, and then at the very last minute, when he's pressed it as far as he can, stepping back from the brink. In this case, he's mastered an art that, let's say in Poland, Jarosław Kaczyński is not quite yet mastered.
And will never be.
Right. But what we've seen over the last week, and I think we're going to get into this in the hydrocarbons question as well, is that we're seeing that the European Union, I think, is coming to realize what they're dealing with. And you're seeing an escalation in the rhetoric. And at a certain point, my suspicion is that Orban's going to pull back just enough. But in the long term, my question is, how long will the European Union be able to tolerate a dictator, an authentic dictator, in its community? And I think this is the conundrum that all of the EU leadership is going to have to deal with.
Especially when you've got the Chinese investments, as you say, Aleksandra, and lots of Russians and Belarusians.
I would say that we are at the turning point, that EU realized what it takes to have this kind of person, this kind of policy inside during the actually open conflict with Russia, with Ukraine. And I think the moment I realized personally that this is actually possible to deal with Hungary, and it's feasible and it's easy, because he needs European money. To be a dictator, you have to... look at Hungary's economy. It has been a flat line. There is no development. And the EU is pouring money into Hungarians. I have a colleague who is half Polish, half Hungarian, and he told me what is the mystery behind this, support for Orban. The rural part of Hungary is... They actually don't care who is ruling in the both of us. They still have their retirement, they still have money, the inflation is not so bad, so everything is cool. And if he can provide this level of security and welfare...
His home base is strong.
Controlling the media, controlling other factors, he could be a dictator for life, as you mentioned. But without European money, he cannot do this.
Unless he replaces it with Russian money, of course.
It's not so easy to do. Russia is not, the money Russia is spending on the war is not endless. And they are striving themselves to balance the situation. I think we've learned during the moment when there was this voting of Sweden to NATO alliance. And Orban backed out. He had to
back down at the end. Yeah, absolutely. Very, very quickly, if you would,
it's a very delicate matter.
Okay.
From one side, because Hungary, it doesn't mean Orban. And Orban doesn't mean Hungary itself. And he loses his support now. We are just watching the new star of Hungarian politics, I mean Peter Magyar, who came into politics last February, and in April he got 30% of support.
Yes.
And big cities like Budapest are against Orban, and I think that the day that we changed our government on the 15th of October is coming to Budapest. And we must watch carefully what happens, support opposition, support free media in Hungary, and trying to make a kind of a moral sanction, and not only moral, I mean also formal sanctions on Orban and his government.
Right.
And I believe that really in 2 or 3 years we'll see the change.
Well, we should be watching that. But I do want us to move on now to our next topic. And that is, we're staying with Hungary, of course, how could we not? The flow of oil and gas, hydrocarbons, from Russia to Hungary and Slovakia through Ukraine, which has blocked such flows from Lukoil, the Russian oil and gas company. As usual, we start off with a short video.
The Druzhba, or Friendship Pipeline, is the world's largest oil network system, pumping crude from the Urals to Europe through 2 branches via Belarus and Ukraine. Now, after more than 2 years of war with Russia, Kyiv has blocked the transit of crude from Moscow's largest private oil firm, Lukoil. Hungary and Slovakia had argued the move violates a 2014 trade deal between Kyiv and the EU, calling on the European Commission to intervene. But on Thursday, the Commission rebuffed the demand, saying there was no immediate risk to the security of oil supplies. At the same time, Croatia offered to transit crude to the 2 countries via its Janaf pipeline operator. The EU imposed an embargo on Russian oil imports after Moscow invaded Ukraine in 2022. However, it exempted pipeline supplies to give countries time to find alternative sources. Poland and Germany stopped taking Russian crude last year, while the Czech Republic plans to halt imports by next year. Hungary, though, went the other way, boosting imports. Don't expect much friendship from EU members in this dust-up over the Druzhba.
So, Adam, I mean, look, there are countries who are weaning themselves off Russian oil. But, of course, again, Hungary is the outlier, as is Slovakia.
Well, exactly. And the question is, how long is the EU going to tolerate it, right? Is there going to be a reaction?
Again, we face that question.
Yeah. So, the same question, because, of course, if you do nothing or very little, then that's going to undermine the very order, right? So that requires, some kind of action. But then again, what can you do that really influences this, right? So, and of course, this reflects Orban's policy, right? So he is basically showing that, he is trying to keep the door open with Russia and so
right.
on.
Okay. But here's the thing. I mean, Ukraine is kind of having talks with the rest of the European Union about membership at some time in the future. The European Union has sanctioned oil imports from Russia. So surely Ukraine is simply doing what the EU would want them to do, aren't they, David? Isn't it?
Well, that's what the Hungarian foreign minister said, that it's a plot between Brussels. He said that yesterday. Szijjártó said it's a plot between Brussels and Kiev to punish us. Well, the fact of the matter is Slovakia and Hungary got exceptions to import this Russian oil, and they were supposed to retool. Often it involves retooling the refineries to deal with different kinds of crude.
Nothing.
They haven't done that. Moreover, both Slovnaft in Slovakia and MOL in Hungary are re-exporting a lot of this fuel elsewhere in the EU. So the fact of the matter is the EU can no longer afford, I think, to ignore this. That's number one. And number two, what can the EU do? The EU can decide not to renew the exception, which expires at the end of this year.
Right. And, of course, Ukraine can keep this.
Putting it in other words, Hungary is making money on Ukrainian suffering,
right?
On war. So this should be put clearly to the audience and to the citizens,
Right.
that this is not acceptable. And the other thing is why it's so important that that this situation should be rectified, because what happened after the attack, full-scale attack in Ukraine, is that Europe remained unified, a unified front, and Russia cannot try to play out member states in different way. Didn't, and the great success of Ursula von der Leyen presidency was that Europe remained unified in respect to Ukraine, in respect to the war.
Right.
And this situation shows that Russia gained some ground, and this is really very dangerous exception. And I think we should really treat it not only in an economical sense or and talk about hydrogens,
Yeah.
but this is absolutely a power play, part of the power play.
Absolutely. I mean, would you agree, Bogusław, that basically there is something going on, isn't there? Something a bit deeper than just the economics, you know?
That's a world scale game.
Yeah.
And you must know from the other side that Lukoil dies. Now it comes to the bankruptcy now, and they have incredible losses, billions of dollars monthly. And I believe that a political sponsor of patron of Lukoil, Mr. Putin, is really looking for an opportunity to give news to the world that Lukoil is still capable of transferring hydrocarbons abroad. As you know, they have incredible problems in China today because China freezed transfers in yuans for hydrocarbons coming to China. And they're just coming to the catastrophe. So Moscow will do everything to protect, the only transfer of hydrocarbons from Russia to Europe. And of course, I think that Putin has not enough long hands to protect it. And the other thing, and the last thing I want to mention is a personal problem with Mr. Hernadi. As you know, he's the president of MOL, pretty important people, probably one of the most influential people in Budapest. He has really big problems with Croatian courts. He was sentenced in Croatia, and he would never, ever support an idea of getting some hydrocarbons from the south via Croatia. So you have another layers of problem in this.
Yeah, it's definitely a very complex picture. But it was only Lukoil really that's been prevented from making these transfers. And the EU is going to, they're saying, we can replace the shortage of oil that you're going to be facing. But Slovakia doesn't believe that. Well, let's see what happens there. Let's move on now. This week,
it's not economic matter. There's a political issue only.
Political and economic. It's as you say, it's a big mess and it's multi-layered.
Yep.
There's no doubt about that. Let's move on to our next topic in the last few minutes. Time's gone so quickly, hasn't it, as it usually does. And that is, of course, that this week we're commemorating the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Uprising. And there were events and so on. And it happened to coincide with, and I hesitate to mention this, a Taylor Swift concert, whom... yes, I don't know terribly much about, but nonetheless, I'm sure you'll be able to educate me, which finished yesterday with a 3-day concert. And the thought that struck me was the kind of the contrast between the two. Here we are. We've got an internationally recognised star coming along and performing for 3 days. Full house for 3 days. Compared to the Uprising. Which was such a tragic. Now, before we get into that short video, as usual, to kick off.
The Swifties came from far and wide, revelling in the rare chance to see their idol perform on stage. The start of Taylor Swift's 3 consecutive nights in the Polish capital coincided with the 80th anniversary of one of Poland's grimmest episodes in the Second World War. The Warsaw Uprising was planned to last less than a week. It went on for 63 days. During that time, German forces tortured and killed some 200,000 residents and went on to raze most of the city. Germany's President Frank-Walter Steinmeier travelled to Warsaw, and asked the Polish people for forgiveness. Every year at 5 p.m. on August the 1st, sirens sound across the city, bringing people and traffic to a standstill. There were concerns concert-goers, unaware of the anniversary's cultural significance, could appear disrespectful. Taylor Swift warned fans with tickets for Thursday's show to expect loud sirens in the afternoon, marking the uprising. When the moment came, many of the fans travelling on foot to the venue also stood in tribute. Of the 60,000 pop fans at the National Stadium, some will have returned home knowing more about Poland's history.
So, David, yes.
Yeah, I think there may be an impulse here, and certainly in the political opposition, to oppose these two events. Let's say the commercial, soulless West and our glorious history. But in fact, I think these are complementary. And I think this was, for example, as you mentioned in the last point of that segment, it was a teaching moment. It was where Poland could put its best foot forward and show some of the best aspects of its history to a lot of visitors. That's
right.
The first thing. The second thing is that I'm old enough to remember how even in communist Poland, people were still talking about the Rolling Stones coming for a concert here in Warsaw. And then the feeling that for more than 40 years, no major Western rock and roll top headliner ever came to Poland to give any concert. And so in that way, I would argue that the symbolism of Taylor Swift coming here for 3 gigantic concerts, 200,000 fans together over the three nights, these venues, shows that Poland has become a part of that West, that the people who were fighting in August 1944, that's what they wanted to be. Well, Taylor Swift is a symbol that their struggle succeeded, and we in Poland are there.
And here's the result. Adam, yes.
Yeah, I think there is these teaching moments are important because there seems to be this trend among some people that Warsaw Uprising was just this adventure of Girl Scouts essentially, and that's of course a big mistake to think that it was a tragedy.
It was.
So it's great that we have these teaching moments, especially for foreigners, because unfortunately even today there is a lot of ignorance about the uprising, and it's one of the major events. Whether it was justified or not, that's another story. We're not going to get into that. But the fact is, it has to be mentioned, it has to be popularized, and any event that makes it possible is worth it.
Right.
And of course, you could say, well, this is a contradiction, but no, you can always mention it in any setting, in my opinion.
Right.
You just need to be smart enough to know how to do it.
To make the connection.
Yes, and once you do it, of course, you can't turn it into a cartoon, but once you know how to do it, it really can, let's say, resonate with.
Understood. Now, Aleksandra, the German president was over. He spoke. Your thoughts on what he said and how that kind of integrated into the commemoration?
It's not the first time that German leader comes to Poland, to Warsaw, and says, "I'm sorry." And I think this is the symbol, time and time again, how miraculous was to rebuild relation after the Second World War between Poland and Germany. And also it's very optimistic and hopeful that this is possible in our other parts of the world. I have to come back to what you said, and I'm very happy that you mentioned this. I totally agree, because in my family there are 2 Warsaw freedom fighters. My grandma and my grandpa took part in the uprising. They survived miraculously. So I remember them teaching me about what happened, and I thought, listening to this the conversation about whether Taylor Swift should be during the commemoration, absolutely yes. They fought for exactly this.
So they said she should be.
They passed away, unfortunately, but I would say they fought for freedom. They fought for Warsaw that would be, for life. They fought with Nazis.
Yeah.
And this concert is like epitome of what they fought for.
Right.
The Warsaw that was destroyed to the ground, burned to the ground, now is a European beautiful capital where people around the globe come to celebrate life. And I think there's nothing best to celebrate this moment.
A great symbol, Bogusław, would you agree?
Memory doesn't mean martyrology.
Right.
Yeah, so these are different matters, yes?
Okay.
And memory. And we memorize, but as I see, and we did a survey about it last days, about the level of martyrology. And the question was if we are proud, as Polish people, of the uprising. 3% only supported this idea. We are proud of independence, John Paul II, etc., etc. Only 3.3% of people took a choice to be proud of uprising. Means that we are just, moving away from martyrology, coming to the real life. To another values, and it's absolutely important from my point of view.
Right.
The other problems that we had last years, we had no concept how to have a narration about this great hecatomb, for the world. Because it's, from my point of view, as a journalist and writer, it's like a Priam's Troya to tell about. 200 people died in 2 months in the biggest uprising in Europe, So it's something to write about. Only 2 Polish directors from the past found a formula how to memorize it. Andrew Wajda in Channel, and another Morgenstern in columns.
Right.
So it's kind of problem how to tell about this great tragedy to the world, how to explain the value of this great national loss. And we are still looking for somebody who will be able just to make a big narration, like about the secession war in the States. It's something like this. So necessary.
Yeah, David, so the collective memory seems to be fading. What can be done?
No, I wouldn't say it's fading. It's in a different context. For example, as I understand that poll, it was not that only 3% of Poles were proud of the Warsaw Uprising. It was that only 3% of Poles put it at first place that they were proud of.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So this is
and
another story.
Poles are proud of the uprising, but it was for something. It was for independence. It was for Poland existing as a sovereign state, which everyone is for. And that's its role. In that case, no, the Warsaw Uprising is very important. It should be remembered, but it needs to be. We constantly need. My background is a historian, and we constantly need to reimagine history and reimagine our tradition in order to make it relevant for the young generation. And so I'm really, really happy that we found a way to make this all relevant, including the great work of the Uprising Museum people have done, to make it relevant for a younger generation, because that's how it's going to live. And I think if you listen to some of the older veterans who are still surviving, they're happiest about the fact that young people are interested. That's what gets them excited. So it's alive. It's
right, it is alive and continuing. In the last few seconds that we have, Adam, your thoughts?
Well, I agree that we can't be, martyrological about this. We need to be pragmatic. We need to remember, it was a tragedy, but we can't just, be about my martyrology.
Right.
We need to be pragmatic, and I think that's the key. And it's great that we are moving away from this martyrology because it doesn't get us anywhere good.
Okay, so I think for the first time this morning we have unanimity around the table, which is great. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, the clock has beaten us. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with our audience. Have a wonderful day. And that's all from us in this episode of Press Corner. Don't go away, lots more coming up as always. Goodbye. Thank you.